Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a world where death rides on the wind, where a simple sneeze can end your life, and where the living burn, the dead in piles by the thousands. The year is 1348. Europe is choking on fear. The Black Death. Most catastrophic pandemic in human history has arrived. But what's even more terrifying than the plague itself is what people believed about it. In an age before science, people turned to superstition, madness, and cruelty. They blamed Jews, witches, demons, even the stars. They burned herbs, whipped themselves bloody, drank potions made from crushed toads and powdered bones. And the worst part, they believed it was God's punishments, so they welcomed death with open arms. This is the true twisted story of the beliefs that spread faster than the disease itself. Welcome to the sickest things. People believed during the Black Death in 1347, when the plague ships arrived from the east carrying rats and fleas. People didn't see disease, they saw divine punishment. To most Europeans, the plague wasn't caused by germs. It was God's fury unleashed upon a sinful world. They pointed to greed, gluttony, lust, and especially pride. The church told them, "This is what you deserve." In response, flagellants emerged. Groups of men bare-chested barefoot marched through towns, whipping themselves bloody, hoping to atone for humanity's sins. They sang hymns, beat their backs raw with iron-tipped whips, and preached that the end was near. The people wept. They believed this would stop the plague. It didn't, as fear turned to hysteria. A new belief spread that Jews were poisoning the wells. In hundreds of towns, Jews were rounded up, tortured into confessions, and massacred by angry mobs. In Strasbourg alone, nearly 2,000 Jews were burned alive in a single day. The church tried to stop the violence. The Pope said the Jews weren't responsible, but the panic couldn't be silenced. People needed a scapegoat. Logic was gone, and the belief that others had caused the plague became a deadly excuse for genocide. Another popular belief: the air itself was sick. Miasma theory, the idea that foul smells carried disease, was everywhere. People carried flowers, perfumed cloths, and scented pomanders to filter the air. Wealthy folks sealed their homes and burned lavender, rosemary, or vinegar-soaked hay. Doctors wore their now iconic plague masks, with long beaks filled with herbs to purify what they breathe. But no flower could stop the fleas. The rot was deeper than scent. Some looked to the skies for answers. Astrologers claimed the Black Death was caused by a planetary alignment, a rare conjunction of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in 1345. They said it corrupted the air and unbalanced the humors of the body. People studied horoscopes to predict outbreaks. Others blamed eclipses or comets. Doctors consulted astrological charts before treating patients. They treated them at all. Science and myth were one and the same. Desperate for hope, people turned to bizarre and deadly remedies. Drinking crushed emeralds if you were rich, applying toad paste to buboes, burning snakes, incense, or sulfur indoors, eating arsenic, as a blood purifier, bathing in urine, or even drinking it. Some wore dead animals around their necks, believing it would draw out the poison. Others simply bled themselves till they passed out. The cure was often worse than the disease in many parts of Europe. It was believed that the plague was the work of witches or demons. Stories circulated of women flying at night, casting curses, or poisoning bread. Midwives and herbalists were especially vulnerable. Many were burned alive or drowned. People believed the devil was collecting souls and sending rats as his messengers. Church bells rang non-stop. Exorcisms were performed in streets. Faith turned to fanaticism, and fear became a religion of its own. Chapter 7: Mass Graves and the Dance of Death. 29 minutes and 30 seconds to 34 minutes and 0 seconds, with entire villages wiped out. The living began to see death as inevitably, and even beautiful art began to depict the danse macabre, the dance of death. Skeletons, kings, and peasants waltzing together in a grim embrace. Mass graves overflowed. These were dumped by the cartload. Monks wrote poems celebrating death as a release from sin. One chilling line from 1349 read, "I saw the rich and poor rot side by side. None were spared. All were leveled by the scythe." The world had become a cemetery. When the plague finally ebbed, the survivors were left shattered physically, emotionally, spiritually. Entire towns had no priests, no doctors, no leaders. Children who grew up during the plague knew only death, and worse, many still believed it would return, because no one had truly learned why it came. The sickest beliefs had done nothing to stop it, but they had changed the world forever. The Black Death didn't just kill people, it killed reason, it killed compassion, it killed trust. In the absence of science, belief became a weapon, and when belief is fueled by fear, it spreads faster than any plague. History shows us what happens when we abandon truth. But it also shows us this: humanity survives. We survived the Black Death, and we can survive anything, so long as we don't forget what fear can do to the mind. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe for more dark and untold truths from history. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't the diseases themselves, but what people believe about them. When medicine failed and priests began to fall ill themselves, people turned to something even more ancient: saints and sacred relics. They believed that the bones of saints, scraps of holy cloth, or even splinters of the true cross could protect them from death. Pilgrims would crawl for miles on bleeding knees just to kiss a vial of dried blood said to belong to Saint Sebastian, the patron saint of plague victims. In Milan, a bishop paraded a statue of the Virgin Mary through the city's streets, holding it high as if her painted eyes could stop the fleas. But sometimes this devotion turned deadly. In Cologne, desperate townspeople broke into a church and tore apart A reliquary convinced that touching the relic directly would make them immune. Dozens were trampled. None were spared. And so, belief became a frenzied hunger to hold the divine, even as death licked at their heels. They believed that one bone could stop a pandemic, that one drop of blood, blessed centuries ago, could rewrite fate. It never did. As the sky turned red during a lunar eclipse in 1348, a new terror swept across Europe, a blood moon crimson and swollen, hung over the cities of England and France like a burning omen. Astrologers warned of doom. Priests declared it the wrath of God made visible. Villagers whispered that the devil had ascended to the heavens to claim the earth. Some believed the world was ending. They sold their homes. They gave away their possessions. They wrote confessions with shaking hands and waited in silence for the sky to fall. Others gathered in fields, kneeling in white robes, weeping and chanting the names of angels. When nothing happened the next day, a new fear took hold. Not that the end had come, but that it hadn't, that this plague was only the beginning, a punishment too terrible to end in fire. They believed the moon had spoken, and the message was not of mercy, but of warning. In normal times, a death meant ritual. Candles were lit, bells were rung, the body was washed, wrapped, blessed, and buried with care. But in the time of the plague, there were too many dead and not enough hands to bury them, and so a new terror was born, the curse of the unburied. People believed that if a soul was not buried properly, it would wander the earth in torment, bringing disease, madness, and more death. Some claimed to see ghostly figures pacing graveyards at night, weeping, clawing at the ground. Children spoke of skeletons in doorways. Women swore they saw corpses at their windows. So, families risked their lives to bury their own. Fathers carried sons through fields of rot. Mothers dug shallow graves by moonlight, not to stop the plague, but to stop the curse, because to die without a grave was to never truly die. Out of the ashes of panic came a new breed. The traveling, plague-sellers, men in wide-brimmed hats and stained cloaks who promised cures for a price. They carried vials of colored water, crushed herbs, and strange powders, all guaranteed to banish the Black Death. Some sold amulets made from wolf teeth. Others hawked scrolls covered in sacred names, written in languages no one understood. One claimed to have the breath of an angel sealed in a jar. They wandered from town to town, making coin from the dead and the dying. But among them were darker figures, phantom healers who disappeared. As soon as night fell, villagers claimed they didn't walk, but floated, cloaked in shadow, that wherever they passed, more people died than before. Were they tricksters? Thieves? Sorcerers? No one knew. But they believed, and that belief in false hope was as deadly as any rat. Among the ruins of once lively towns, survivors whispered of a strange and haunting phenomenon. Children who stopped crying. Babies born during the height of the Black Death were said to be marked by silence. They did not laugh, They did not weep. They only watched, died. As the world crumbled around them, some believed these children were blessed, immune to the disease. Others feared they were cursed, vessels of the devil, born into death itself. One chronicler wrote, "Their faces were pale as chalk, their mouths closed, their eyes to knowing, as if they remembered the grave before they left the womb." In one village, these children were hidden away, fed in silence, raised in shadow, feared by their own mothers. Many of them vanished. Some were said to have walked into the forests and never returned. They became myths, and the silence they carried became a warning that even the youngest were not spared, not by disease, not by belief. Across the Mediterranean, rumors spread of ghost ships, abandoned vessels drifting silently, sails torn, their decks covered in corpses. They were called plague ships. It was believed these ships had once carried food, spices, and fabrics, until the rats came. Once the crew died, the ships kept floating, steered only by wind and tide. Fishermen swore they saw them at sunrise, black hulls. No flags, no sound but creaking wood. One Genoese port claimed to find a ship full of chained slaves and their dead captors. Another tale told of a Venetian galley where only the rats survived. Some said these ships were cursed, floating eternally as punishment. Others feared that to look upon one was to fall ill within days. They were burned at sea when spotted, and yet they always returned. The belief in their cursed cargo spread far faster than the ships themselves, and yet, even in the darkest hour, belief didn't only turn to madness. In many corners of Europe, among ashes and graves, there were still those who believed in mercy, midwives who stayed behind to help the dying, priests who refused to flee and instead walked door to door offering comfort, ordinary people who opened their homes to strangers and shared what little they had. They believed not in relics or stars, not in curses or ghosts, but in kindness. Some called them fools, others called them saints, but in their belief, a gentle, quiet belief, something unexpected survived. Hope, and perhaps it is this belief, above all others, that carried humanity out of the plague, not through science, not through strength, but through the quiet courage to be kind. When the world had turned cruel,